Hey everyone, welcome back to this explainer made by PoH College. So if you've been following along, you know that in our previous lesson, how PoH fits into Solana's architecture, we mapped out the really high-level system. We saw exactly how proof of history threads directly into the runtime to give us this continuous, highly verifiable stream of time. But today we're taking a massive step forward. We're transitioning from that high-level architectural view to figuring out how proof of history actually acts as a clock for consensus. Think about it. How does a local ticking clock completely change the way a massive global network agrees on the state of reality? It's kind of a fascinating mechanical puzzle. So let's dive right in.
Here's our blueprint for today. First, we'll unpack the railway metaphor. Then, we'll look at what PoH actually does. Third, we'll talk about resolving track disputes. Fourth, we've got a tale of two forks. And finally, we'll wrap up with speed versus global agreement.
All right, Section 1, the railway metaphor, looking at logistics and schedules.
To really wrap our heads around the system, it helps to treat this blockchain network like a bustling, engineering-grade train yard. Seriously, it's all about logistics, tight schedules, and making absolutely sure the cargo gets exactly where it needs to go without any catastrophic collisions. Which naturally poses a pretty critical question. If proof of history acts as this perfect, infallible clock for the station, do we actually still need the network to vote? Well, I'll go ahead and spoil it for you right now. Yes, absolutely. But the entire nature of what we are voting on completely shifts.
Let's map this railway analogy directly to our technical terminology so we're all on the same page. Think of the station master as our leader. That's the node currently responsible for producing a block. The station master's cryptographically signed timetable, that is the proof of history stream. The traffic controllers out on the network, who are constantly checking the work, those are our validators. And finally, the cargo itself, the individual cars moving down the line, those are the transactions. If you can visualize these logistics, honestly, you'll instantly grasp how block assembly works.
Moving right along to Section 2, what PoH actually does with clock mechanics.
Okay, the crucial piece of the puzzle here is understanding the deterministic timestamp. See, in a normal distributed system, a node says, hey, I processed this at 2 p.m., and everyone else basically just has to trust their wall clock. But with proof of history, the station master prints out a cryptographically signed timetable. And this timetable mathematically proves exactly which train left the platform first, second, and third. It's this beautiful, unbroken sequence of hashes. A validator can verify this sequence completely internally without ever needing to text another node and ask, hey, what time do you have? The proof is 100% self-contained.
There's this quote from the source material that I absolutely love, and it's definitely worth reading in full. It says, PoH is primarily a deterministic ordering oracle within a leader's timeline. Consensus remains the mechanism for turning that localized order into global agreement. Guys, this is the golden rule. The local schedule, like the exact sequence of trains leaving Station A, is set flawlessly by proof of history. But to prevent train crashes out on the shared global tracks, we still very much need a global consensus system.
Which brings us to Section 3, resolving track disputes. Because, yeah, consensus is still needed.
Let's break down how PoH changes the game for these specific tasks. For transaction ordering within a single block, PoH provides deterministic evidence. Boom, no extra voting needed. But for inter-leader ordering across different forks, we absolutely still require vote exchanges. And by the way, mastering these kinds of nuanced architectural details is exactly the kind of deep dive you'll find in the advanced courses over at PoH College. Finally, looking at finality, while PoH massively speeds up local reasoning, finalizing global agreement still requires the network's voting mechanisms.
Now, let's talk about equivocation, which is really just a fancy academic way of saying a leader is flat out lying to the network by producing inconsistent sequences. Without proof of history, proving a lie takes a whole lot of network chatter. It's messy. But with PoH, catching a lying station master becomes incredibly obvious. It is the literal equivalent of them publishing two completely different printed timetables for the exact same track at the exact same time. The tracker controllers, our validators, can just look at the cryptographic hashes and instantly spot the fraud. Busted.
All right, Section 4. A tale of two forks, overlap and resolution.
Let's put this into a slightly chaotic, real-world scenario to see how it plays out. Imagine Leader A is just crushing it. They successfully send out their local sequence of trains. Train 1 departs, then Train 2, then Train 3. This is all perfectly verified on the proof of history timetable. Everyone locally agrees the order is T1, T2, T3. But suddenly, right after T3, there's a propagation delay. Just a random network hiccup, which means the rest of the world hasn't quite seen this timetable yet.
And this is where things get super tricky. While Leader A's timetable is delayed in transit, Leader B's slot overlaps. Leader B, who hasn't seen A's full sequence yet, goes ahead and emits its own trains, T2 and T4. Now we're on a collision course. We have two perfectly valid local timetables, but globally they completely conflict. So who steps in? The traffic controllers. The validators now have to look at these overlapping schedules and resolve the competing chains.
So, how do we fix this? Enter fork choice. This is the consensus rule set and the quorum of votes used to pick the winning sequence. And guys, this is exactly why proof of history doesn't replace voting. PoH doesn't magically pick a winner here, it just hands over these incredibly crisp, mathematically bulletproof schedules for the validators to vote on. The validators step up, apply the fork choice rules, and collectively commit to the canonical ledger.
Finally, Section 5, Speed versus Global Agreement and the Magic of Optimistic Confirmation.
This right here is the ultimate payoff for all this engineering. Unbelievable transaction speed. The magic phrase is optimistic confirmation. Because the local PoH timetable is verifiable and totally deterministic, we don't have to sit around waiting for the whole world to vote before we feel confident. We get this really early confidence in the transaction ordering. It's exactly like knowing the exact millisecond a train left the station and knowing its top speed. We can confidently predict its arrival way before it actually pulls into the station. For anyone using the network, this drastically improves the perceived throughput and speed.
But look, as much as we love speed, we have to respect the cold, hard engineering reality. It's a dual-layered system. You have your early PoH-backed confidence on one side versus consensus-backed global finality on the other. Optimistic confirmation is blazingly fast. It's amazing for user interfaces, but the system absolutely still has to be designed to handle potential downstream reorganizations. If that global track arbitration shifts, like what we saw in our chaotic tale of two forks, the system must be prepared to roll back to the globally agreed-upon finality.
So, let's bring it all together and summarize the core operational separations we've covered today. Proof of history guarantees local, intra-leader order. It's your flawless station timetable. Consensus, on the other hand, solves the global, interleader conflicts. PoH heavily speeds up equivocation detection, so lying leaders get caught instantly. It also enables those lightning-fast optimistic confirmations, but at the end of the day, votes are still required for ultimate network safety and finality. Local clock, global agreement.
Honestly, wrapping your head around that separation is a massive mental unlock. And you're going to want to hold tightly onto this railway mental model, because in our very next explainer in this track, we are tackling transaction ordering mechanisms and determinism. We'll be looking at how things get even more mechanical when we zoom way in on the exact ordering within those individual blocks. Before we wrap this up, I want to leave you pondering one final, kind of provocative thought. Which consensus assumptions does proof of history actually weaken, and which remain absolutely decisive for the safety of the network? Really think about that shift in responsibility we just explored. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today for this explainer made by Forge College. If you want to continue your Web3 journey and dig into more amazing resources, enthusiastically head over and visit forge.college. Keep exploring, and I'll see you in the next one.